everyone. My last video about Matt Walsh and others saying that feminism was responsible for transgenderism provoked some lively exchanges in the comments section. I'm not sure if there's anything to address, but if there is, I will do so in another video that I'm planning, which I see as the natural sequel to that one about why some women, including some who call themselves feminists, support what they see as trans rights. As some of you know, I've been trying to get responses from such women on Twitter/X. I've written a blog post at peaktrans.org with all the questions that I want answered. I live in hope. In the meantime, I think it's high time I added to my Awful Arguments by Trans Activists series, and one such argument that I see quite often is that the words woman and man refer to social identities. But this claim brings up the same problem as saying woman isn't a sex but a gender, just as we can never get anyone to give a coherent explanation of what they mean by woman gender and man gender. I mean, what is it that makes a woman or a man, if not their potential role in reproduction? The same goes for when they say man or woman is a social identity. What does that mean? I think it's easy to understand social identity as defined by social identity theory in psychology, when it refers to your membership of a recognizable social or cultural group and how important your membership of that group is to you. You might say your religion or your ethnic or cultural heritage is an important part of who you are, or it could be your politics or your ethical choices, like being green and or being a vegan. It could just be your passion for a particular football team or genre of music, or it could be that you're a gay man or a lesbian. It could be several of those things. The point is that you feel it's an important part of your identity and you take pride in it, and you feel a natural affinity with others who share membership of the same group. They are your in-group and you get a sense of connection and of belonging. Now, I think claiming a transgender status works as a social identity. Your in-group comprises other people who call themselves transgender. You may call it the trans community, but whatever you call it, these are your people. But to claim man and woman are social identities means something different. It means you want to present as the other sex and be accepted as such by everyone. Being perceived as a woman or a man is something those of us who are content to be women or men don't even think about. We know we already look and sound like what we are, and in most cases very clearly so. And we're okay with that, and we don't see the mere fact of being a woman or a man as a social identity. It's not being part of a group, it's just being the same sex as about half of the rest of the population. Of those who insist that woman and man are social identities, when asked what they mean by that, most don't respond, or they respond with a load of waffle like this. Woman is a social identity with a set of related characteristics and tropes, just like women is a social category, a broad box which contains a huge range of variation. This tells us nothing. Of course, they will say exactly the same thing for man as a social identity, but what they won't say is what these characteristics and tropes are, and how do we tell which ones are for women and which ones are for men. And the reason they won't say isn't because they don't know, but because they do know that these characteristics depend on old-fashioned stereotypes. Occasionally, someone is brave enough to go so far as to say, A woman is a social identity based on femininity. A man is a social identity based on masculinity. Of course, we're not told what he means by femininity and masculinity, but this is at least an admission that he thinks woman should be based on socially constructed ideas of what is appropriate for women. How is that a progressive position? Someone who is brave enough to go further is the YouTuber Rod Fleming, who argues that woman is a social identity predicated on the successful performance of femininity. It's not complicated. No, it certainly isn't complicated. It's incredibly simple-minded. But note the qualifier, successful performance of femininity. Rod has posted countless pictures of young men to show what he thinks a successful performance of femininity looks like. And I agree with him. These guys do look very feminine by the standards of today. They are young, slim, and certainly in the pictures and probably in real life can be mistaken for beautiful young women. If that's the definition of a woman, then any man who doesn't look like a beautiful young feminine girl can't be a woman, even if he claims to be one. Then again, if that's the definition of a woman, most adult human females aren't women either, which is a bit silly, to put it mildly. Now, let me come to what inspired me to make this particular video. A brand new YouTube channel with 0 subscribers, so far as I can see, tagged me because their first and so far only video is reacting to one of mine. Unfortunately, 4 weeks after uploading, it only had 8 views. The YouTuber is anonymous, and I'm not sure how to pronounce the channel's name. Komi-kun, I'll just call them Komi, who says that they are transgender and a radical trans activist. I think, but I don't know for sure, that Komi is female, although the voice is convincingly male, as is often the case when a woman has been on testosterone for a while, or when she uses a voice changer.
The wonders of modern technology.
But I can't rule out Komi being male. The video that he or she is responding to is the very first one in my series of awful arguments, the one called A Woman Is. And I'm going to start by taking a clip from about 13 minutes into Komi's response, just so that I can correct it. By the way, Komi uses a rather weird technique where I am shown bobbing around, as I tend to do when I'm speaking, but I'm all fuzzed out, presumably so viewers aren't mesmerised by my rare and exquisite beauty, while Komi narrates over me. Have a look.
Now, I know that she established at the beginning that she believes trans ideology to be the problem, rather than individual trans people, most of whom she asserts actually disagree. With, I guess, what you call modern trans ideology.
What I actually say is this. The term transgender ideology refers to a collection of ideas that are promoted by trans activists and supporters. Many trans people disagree with some or all of them. So many, not most. In fact, I think most trans-identifying people do agree with some or all of gender ideology. And by the way, if I were making that video, which is more than 3 years old today, I would say trans-identifying people, not just trans people, meaning that this is the label that some people choose for themselves, but I don't agree that it represents people who are innately different from the rest of us. I did think the same back then, but my position has become more entrenched because of what I've learned in the years since. But I do say in that video that nobody is born in the wrong body, and Komi agrees.
The truth is, no one was born in the wrong body, just like no one was born in the right body. Your body is just your body, without any goodness or badness inherently attached to it. However, this isn't to say that people's bodies don't have the ability to cause them significant pain and distress. They do. Just because your body isn't inherently right or wrong, doesn't mean that it's functional in the way a body typically should be. Your body and brain still have the potential to be flawed. So, when a trans person's brain develops in a way which causes them to perceive an incongruence between their biological sex and their perceived sex, this can cause mental distress, which can range from being extremely severe to almost non existent.
I mainly agree with what Commie has said there. Of course, we might all wish that we had perfectly functioning, physically fit bodies, and of course some people get very distressed because of their bodies and wish they were different, and some wish they were the other sex. I would question the framing of the last bit about the brains of people developing in a way that causes them to perceive an incongruence over their sex, because that makes it sound as if this supposed incongruence is something that happens to all trans-identifying people, when all the reading and listening and research I've done over the past 7 years leads me to see the desire to be perceived and accepted as the other sex as a symptom of other things. Certainly depression, despair and anxiety can play a huge part, but these states of mind are often natural human responses to personal experiences that have nothing to do with any innate sense of gender, but from which the modern phenomenon of transgenderism appears to offer an escape route, a chance to reinvent oneself as a different person from the one who has suffered from feeling different because of autism, from being bullied, from being abused. There is more than one reason why people adopt a transgender identity. There is a huge difference between the motivations of the middle-aged or older straight man and the younger gay man, and then the straight or lesbian woman of any age. By the way, I'd like to give a plug to Dr. Az Hakim's latest book, Detrans, When Transition is Not the Solution. The book features a number of mind-blowing personal accounts from detransitioners, as well as Dr. Hakim's overview based on his many years of experience working as a psychiatrist with trans-identifying patients. Right, where does Commie disagree with me? Going back to about 3 minutes into their video, I am unfuzzed and allowed to speak for myself. There's only one way you get to be a woman, and it's not hard. First, you get born female, then you grow up. Simple as that.
Okay, so right off the bat, we've come to my least favorite part of the main reason why this video was so fucking painful to make. Semantics. McLaughlin considers woman to be synonymous with female, and of course I disagree.
Although the words woman and female can be used synonymously, as in women's changing rooms, female changing rooms, etc., it's important to remember the distinction between the two words now that we are fighting to hang on to their original meanings against those who are trying to redefine them in a way that no good can come of for women and girls. Female refers to biological sex in humans, in other animals and organisms, and it is on this basis that we form a political class, and it is on this basis that women are oppressed as a class, not because of how we identify. The word woman only refers to female human beings. Although both women and cows, say, are female, and I confess I may have sometimes said of another woman, oh, what a cow, but I have never once seen a cow and said, oh, what a woman. So they're not completely synonymous, as in interchangeable. And on the words woman and female, Commie says,
Now, we could attempt to find some concrete meaning to these terms. However, given how ever-changing the English language is, we're pretty unlikely to get a straightforward answer.
yeah, this is the kind of twaddle that typically accompanies the attempts made to forcibly redefine, to the detriment of women and girls, what are in fact words with established definitions. This is often phrased as language evolves by the genderists. Yes, Language evolves to become easier, to enhance clarity and ease of communication. It doesn't evolve to make things more confusing. That isn't evolution. If a change in language is forced, as it sometimes is, it will only catch on if it ultimately makes things clearer and easier for most people. I remember sitting in a pub in Lewisham, which is in southeast London. It's where I lived when I was a student. Now, this would have been back in the early 1980s. And a woman in our company who happened to be a Labour councillor was saying that the council had voted to use the word chair instead of chairman or chairwoman. Until that point in time, I and most people, I think, had only ever heard the word chair as a noun, a piece of furniture, or as a verb meaning to chair a meeting. To start calling the person chairing the meeting a chair sounded ridiculous to me at first, but as this councillor said, chairman is sexist. Addressing a woman as Madam Chairman, as commonly happened, sounded silly, and Chairwoman sounded unwieldy and lent itself to ridicule. That was a forced change that was ultimately successful. It caught on nationwide quite quickly because it made sense. It wasn't confusing. But when a change to language is deliberately introduced and people don't use it because, far from making it clearer, it obscures the truth, and when the only way to make people use it is to bully them, to call them names, to get them cancelled and fired, to even make laws forcing them, that's not evolution, that's Orwellian. It's tyrannical, and there will inevitably be rebellion. And we will win. Common sense will prevail.
Instead, I think it would be better to make a case of what these terms should mean.
Should mean?
Now, in order to do this, we must first ask the question, why do TERFs want the definition of a woman to be synonymous with the definition of a female?
Or, to put it more accurately, why are we resisting your attempts to forcibly change the definitions of words that have clear and stable meanings? By the way, although I believe Commie to be decent and well-intentioned and sincere about wanting to start a dialogue, this impression is somewhat undermined by your repeated use of the term TERF, my dear. Although we have reclaimed the word and turned it into a badge of pride, you could say it's our social identity, when it's used by trans activists, it's derogatory. As Julie Bindel said, it's spelt C-U-N-T, or it might as well be, because it's used to dehumanize, dismiss, and target us with violence. Okay, the couple of reasons that Commie gives for why we are resisting redefinition are in fact consequences of gender ideology and are in fact why we resist the whole of it, not just the attempts to change our language. The first reason given is our wanting to keep our single-sex spaces and sports. Fair enough. Second reason.
They feel as though allowing biological males to identify with the experience of womanhood reduces women's social and personal experiences to simply being about negative sex stereotypes.
I wouldn't put it like that. Men being strong and courageous and decisive and practical and all that kind of stuff, women being kind and compassionate and nurturing, these are not negative stereotypes. They're all good. The problem with even positive stereotypes is that they are restrictive. They are a straitjacket which is being reinforced by gender ideology, at least superficially, because the truth is that men who adopt a trans identity no more fit the feminine stereotype than any other man does. So many of them display the worst possible traits of so-called masculinity. Crude, obnoxious and entitled. The feminist perspective is that it's okay for men to have what are conventionally seen as feminine qualities and vice versa. And this doesn't make people the other sex. It doesn't even make them another gender.
This idea is usually dependent on the belief that trans people in some way rely on sex stereotypes as an important determinant of their identity.
That's because they are an important determinant of their identity.
Nobody knows how anybody else feels inside.
Well, I believe I don't actually feel the way a normal man should feel.
Maybe that you identify with certain stereotypes of the female gender role. But
This is why we see this ridiculous notion of the gender spectrum being promoted by gender ideologues like the Mermaids Charity, as if men having some degree of so-called feminine appearance and qualities makes them less of a man and more of a woman, and the other way round for so-called masculine women. Now, what Comey does is propose that the term female is used to refer to biological sex.
The definition of a female human would be defined as of, relating to, or being the human sex that typically has the capacity to bear young or produce eggs. Now, this definition is pretty widely accepted, so there's not really much to debate around it.
You think? A lot of the gender cultists disagree. They are on social media day after day stating, mostly without any attempt at justification, not only that trans women are women, but that trans women are female. But credit to Comey for stating the truth, albeit anonymously. Now, what about woman?
Within this model, a woman is defined as a social identity, which refers to the personal and social expressions of female humans and those perceived and treated as female humans in society.
Okay, so this definition includes all those who attempt to express themselves according to feminine stereotypes, whether they succeed or not. And let's be honest, mostly they don't. It also includes actual women as long as we are perceived as female. Comey goes further than Rod Fleming, who, as we have seen, restricts his definition to those who successfully perform femininity, and he refers to men like these as gorillas in dresses, which is really rather unkind to gorillas.
So within this model, if a trans woman, for example, were to come along and claim the social identity of a woman, the protection of biological females as a sex class would not be jeopardized, since being a female is based on objective criteria, meaning that it's possible for laws and policies to be created exclusively for the benefit of females.
Tried that, it doesn't work. In the UK, we have the Equality Act 2010, which purportedly protects people on the grounds of both gender reassignment and sex, which are two conflicting objectives. It defines women as females of any age and specifies that services can be single sex if it can be shown to be a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim. It hasn't worked because men who think they are entitled to claim to be women won't accept their banishment from female spaces, and the feelings of women do not matter enough to service providers. Women and girls have been abused, molested, raped and traumatized in women's spaces by men who claim to be women, as well as cheated in sports and displaced in reserved occupations, shortlists and elected positions. How are you going to stop that happening when your fellow radical trans activists, also known as men's sexual rights activists, have no compunction about trying to silence us, trying to ruin our livelihoods and using violence against us?
In this scenario, trans women who function socially as women, that is, trans women whose identities are confirmed and affirmed by society, have the ability to define themselves accurately.
If they were to define themselves accurately, they'd say things like young gay man with feminine tastes, or middle-aged heterosexual husband and father whose cross-dressing fetish is out of control. The word woman would be no part of an accurate description for anyone born male. And how are you going to get society, people, to affirm a falsehood without enacting draconian laws that will punish people who refuse to go along with a lie? Thanks to your movement, that is the way we are headed. Is that what you want? Because it is absolutely what most trans activists I've had the misfortune to come across want, and they make no secret of it.
and in a way which furthers the relief of their sex dysphoria and improves their quality of life, while also being granted legal protections as both members of the LGBTQ community and as women.
As this video is getting rather long, I won't discuss dysphoria now. I'll maybe do that in a separate video sometime. The meaning of the word is extremely vague. Nevertheless, it is gender dysphoria, a condition invented by trans activists that has been included in the DSM, the hugely influential American Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders for the past decade. What I will do is link below to articles by German psychologist Stefanie Bode about it. Barry Wall has also done a short video recently, and I'll link to that as well.
Under this model, females have the ability and language they need to also communicate their social and personal experiences with womanhood. We do this by first acknowledging that trans women and female women have similar but different lived experiences and social obstacles.
Really? Has it occurred to you that women living in 21st century liberal democracies have similar but different lived experiences with all men, regardless of what they call themselves? If you're going to make this argument, you're going to have to be more specific. Like, what do you see as the similarities we have with those men who claim to be a kind of woman and those who don't? Because I absolutely feel I have more in common with men who don't LARP as women, but whose values and interests I share, because the men who have the most empathy with actual women tend to be the ones who don't want to be women. Right, there's about another half minute's worth of this stuff, and then we get this.
Oh, also, if the hours I put into that explanation didn't convince you, the modern scientific consensus agrees with me, so fuck you.
And there we have it. They'll make a radical trans activist out of you yet, commie. And thanks for reminding me of another awful argument from the trans cult playbook that I haven't yet made a video about. The scientific consensus agrees with you? I don't think so. In spite of that last bit and the male-sounding voice, I am now totally convinced that Commie is female with a very limited understanding of male sexuality and indeed of the phenomenon of transgenderism, which is often the case with those caught up in it. They don't have the objective overview that is possible for the rest of us to have. Commie, like so many trans-identifying young women, feels a need to make common cause with trans-identifying men who don't actually give a damn about females, whether trans-identifying or not. They don't care about women in general. I will, of course, link to Commie's video below, but if you do decide to watch the whole of it and to comment, I urge you to please be kind. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.